Welcome back to the deep dive. This week we're going to be covering all the big crypto and blockchain news from March 17th to the 24th, 2025. We've pulled together, I think, all the top stories. And basically, I think we really want to try to give you a sense of what happened and why it matters.
Yeah, think of it as a curated briefing.
Yeah.
We filtered out all the noise,
Yeah.
so we can focus on developments that could have a real impact.
Yeah.
Things like policy shifts and market movements. But we're really here to connect the dots for you.
Okay, so right off the bat, let's jump into it. And the Trump administration seems to have been like a major player this past week. One of the big news items was this planned renaming of USA to the U.S. International Humanitarian Assistance.
Or IHA.
Yeah, IHA. But it's not just a new name, right? There's this initiative to really integrate blockchain technology into their aid operations.
What's so fascinating about this is the potential for like a real shakeup in how humanitarian aid is managed. Like, imagine using an immutable ledger to track donations, verify distribution, and ultimately, increase trust and efficiency, like making sure that aid gets to where it's needed most.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Trust. I mean, if you've got a transparent, auditable record of every transaction, you can cut down on the waste and ensure that the aid is reaching its intended recipients. However, I was struck by the lack of specifics. We don't really have a lot of details about, like, what blockchain technology they're going to use or if cryptocurrencies are even part of the plan.
I agree. I mean, that's the crucial piece we're missing here. I mean, the success of this whole initiative hinges on the implementation.
Yeah.
So, are they going to opt for a public blockchain where every transaction is visible? Or will it be a private permission one, which, gives them more control but maybe less transparency? That choice is going to have a huge impact on the level of accountability they can achieve.
Makes you wonder about the practical challenges of like implementing this type of system in real world situations.
Oh, yeah. In complex humanitarian environments, I mean.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to another big story about the Trump administration. This one has to do with the SEC. They decided to drop their lawsuit against Ripple, and this has been going on forever. I mean, the SEC has been alleging that Ripple sold unregistered securities through XRP.
Yeah, this lawsuit has been a dark cloud over Ripple, really, and the broader crypto market for years. I mean, the core issue here is whether XRP should be classified as a security or not. And Ripple has always argued that it's not, and this withdrawal by the SEC is a significant development.
Yeah, Ripple's CEO, Brett Garlinghouse, saw it as a huge victory. He called it, a major shift in the regulatory landscape. And the market definitely responded. I mean, XRP saw its price jump almost 14%.
Right. Oh, for sure. That price surge shows how relieved the market is.
Yeah.
And maybe even a growing optimism about the regulatory environment under the current administration. Taking a step back, it could mean that regulators are willing to be a bit more nuanced in their approach to different crypto assets.
Yeah, that's a great point. So speaking of the administration's view, President Trump himself actually made some very bold statements in a pre-recorded address to the Blockworks Digital Assets Summit. He made it very clear. He wants the U.S. to be like the dominant force in Bitcoin and the global crypto space. Pretty ambitious.
Oh, yeah, he wasn't holding back at all. He even criticized what he sees as like restrictive crypto policies from previous administrations. His vision is that the U.S. should be at the forefront of this tech.
Yeah. And he also mentioned plans to introduce, more clear regulations aimed at boosting investment and fostering innovation. And there was this really interesting idea he threw out there about establishing a national Bitcoin reserve to bolster U.S. holdings.
I mean, this whole concept of a national Bitcoin reserve, it's got people talking. It kind of suggests that Bitcoin's becoming more and more important on the global financial stage.
Absolutely. Now, let's switch gears to ETFs for a sec. Canary Capital Group announced they're going to launch a Sui cryptocurrency ETF. Now, this would be linked to the spot price of Sui.
Yeah, and this is a really good example of the growing mainstream interest in getting into a wider range of cryptocurrencies, but through regulated investment products. Canary Capital already has a bunch of other crypto ETF applications just waiting. So it seems like they're pretty sure that regulators will keep approving these things.
And a Sui ETF would be a first. And Sui itself is a pretty big deal, right? I mean, it's in the top 25 cryptos by market cap.
Exactly. Investment firms are going beyond just Bitcoin and Ethereum. And that shows that the market's maturing and that there's a broader understanding of, what different blockchain ecosystems can do. Sui, for instance, is known for how fast and how scalable it is. I mean, A Sui ETF could open it up to a whole new group of investors,
Yeah.
those who are more comfortable with those traditional investment vehicles.
Let's talk about what happened with OKX. They decided to temporarily suspend their DEX aggregator services because of inquiries from European Union regulators. And there were also reports that the platform was used by North Korean hackers to launder funds that were stolen from the Bybit hack.
Yeah, this just shows you the challenges crypto platforms face when it comes to navigating all the regulations, especially when it comes to security and stopping illicit activities. I mean, if a DEX aggregator is being used for money laundering, well, that highlights just how important strong security measures are across, the entire crypto ecosystem.
Right. And OKX said they're doing this so they can implement additional security measures. It's a tough balancing act, offering these innovative services while also making sure everything's above board and preventing misuse.
It also brings up a really important point for the average crypto user. When you're using decentralized platforms or aggregators, you have to be more responsible for your own security.
Wow.
This whole situation is a reminder that there are risks, and you need to choose platforms that have a good track record when it comes to security.
All right, moving on to a different type of investment, there's RDX shares. They manage about $6 billion in assets, and they launched a Bitcoin corporate convertible bond ETF. It trades under the ticker BMX. Now, this is a pretty interesting way to get into Bitcoin without directly owning it.
Yeah, it's a unique approach. So instead of investing in Bitcoin directly, the ETF invests in those convertible bonds that are issued by companies that hold Bitcoin in their reserves. So how well the ETF does is linked to the financial health of these companies.
So it's a more traditional investment, but it gives you a kind of indirect exposure to Bitcoin. It might be appealing to investors who are still on the fence about, actually owning crypto, but are interested in the potential gains, like dipping your toes in.
Right. And it offers some diversification because you're investing in debt from established companies and not just riding the waves of Bitcoin's price swings. But it's important to keep in mind that the returns you get might not match Bitcoin's price movements exactly. They're also affected by how well the companies do and the overall bond market.
All right, now let's shift to the Bank of Korea. They recently decided not to hold any Bitcoin in their foreign exchange reserves. Their big worry, Bitcoin's volatility.
Yeah, this makes sense. Most central banks are very cautious about risk when they're managing reserves. They want assets that are stable, easy to trade, and have very little credit risk. The Bank of Korea even said that Bitcoin doesn't meet the IMF's guidelines for reserve assets because of these things.
It's a clear sign that while Bitcoin's getting more popular in lots of areas, the big players like central banks in developed economies are still pretty hesitant. That volatility is still a big barrier.
And when you compare that to President Trump's big plans for a U.S. Bitcoin reserve, well, it shows you how differently people are thinking about Bitcoin's role in the global financial system. One sees it as a strategic asset. The other, a big central bank, sees that volatility as a deal breaker.
That leads us to the pushback that President Trump's idea for this U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve and the digital asset stockpile is getting from the crypto community. Apparently, the government already has like 200,000 Bitcoin from seizures, but the announcement hasn't been all that well received.
It seems like people are mostly upset because there aren't a lot of details about how this is all going to work. Sure, the idea of a national Bitcoin reserve sounds kind of cool, but a lot of people in the industry are asking for more specifics. They want to know how this reserve is going to be managed, what the strategy is, and how it all fits into the existing crypto market.
Yeah, and some people feel like the announcement was more about taking credit for the Bitcoin the government already seized instead of laying out a clear plan for the future. It didn't have the level of detail and strategic vision that the industry was looking for.
This really shows the difference between just saying nice things about crypto and actually putting policies into place. The crypto community wants to see real action and clear rules. It begs the question, how can governments really get involved and support the crypto industry in a way that's more than just holding Bitcoin?
So despite some of the skepticism, we are seeing the surge in interest in cryptocurrency ETFs. I mean, there's been a ton of filings. We're seeing applications for ETFs for Dogecoin, Adara, Aptos, and a bunch of others. And they're joining the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs that are already out there.
Right. I mean, this flood of ETF filings, it shows you how much demand there is from both regular investors and institutional investors for regulated ways to get into a whole range of different cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. And if you look at the reported probabilities of approval for these new ETF applications, it's like 67 to 75%, which suggests that we're probably going to see a whole lot more of these crypto investment products becoming available to everyone.
And that could have a pretty big impact. It could bring more institutional money into these altcoins, which might make them more stable. It also gives investors more choices when it comes to diversifying their crypto holdings, but within a framework that they're familiar with and that's regulated.
Last but not least, we saw the White House saying they're in favor of getting rid of an IRS rule about DeFi reporting. They're citing privacy concerns. This is another interesting twist when it comes to regulation.
It is. I mean, the original IRS rule was supposed to help with tax compliance in the DeFi space, but the way it was going to be implemented, well, people got really worried about their privacy. And in a decentralized setup, it's tough to report everything anyway. So the fact that the White House is supporting its repeal, well, it shows that they understand these problems.
And this could be part of a bigger picture where the administration is taking a more careful look at how to regulate the crypto space. They want to make sure there's oversight, but they also want to encourage innovation and protect people's privacy.
You know, if you think about everything we've talked about, the SEC and Ripple, the optimism about ETF approvals, and now this potential rollback on DeFi reporting, it seems like regulators and policymakers are really starting to get into the nitty-gritty of different crypto assets and maybe move towards a more tailored approach to regulation.
Okay, so to sum it all up for you, this week really showed how much the Trump administration is focusing on blockchain and crypto. But we're still waiting to see the details of what they plan to do. There are also some major shifts happening when it comes to regulations, like the SEC dropping the Ripple case, all the excitement about ETFs, and even the possibility of less strict DeFi reporting rules. And while there's a lot of enthusiasm in the market, there's also a lot of healthy skepticism. People want to see concrete plans from the government.
What's really fascinating is how these big policy moves are bumping up against all the innovation happening in the market, all the new ETFs, DeFi, and other blockchain technologies. It's a really interesting time. Traditional finance is getting more and more involved in crypto, but the regulations are still playing catch up.
Exactly. So as you try to make sense of all these rapid changes in policy and tech, here's something to think about. With governments pushing for national strategies and all these adjustments to regulations, what does decentralization really mean in the future? And could all these top-down forces actually help or hurt that core idea of the crypto world? It's definitely a question worth pondering as this whole space keeps evolving so quickly.